Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Matt today. Matt is an individual having some Bigfoot activity on his family farm area in Northeast Missouri. It's a privilege to talk to you today, Matt. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you very much. It's nice to speak to you.
Thank you. And, you know, the more that we talked about this before the episode, the more excited I'm getting for this because, I mean, you're telling me things like this has been going on for an extended period of time. So I'm going to give the reins over to you, and please share what you've been experiencing over the years, Matt.
Oh, yeah. So a little background in the area. I'm in Northeast Missouri and Pike County, Missouri, which some people may know it for the Momo sightings, the Missouri monster from the early 70s. And I mean, the sightings go back farther than that. They're still going on today. And the farm, we have a couple hundred acres, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, that has been in the family. There's been about 7-8 generations of my family on this farm. My dad was the first one to actually purchase it, but where he lived, my grandfather was kind of like what you would call a mountain man nowadays, and he hunted and trapped in this area. My dad was in this area growing up, and my grandfather, my dad, and my mom had sightings and encounters. My older brother, he had a couple sightings, and my son-in-law, my wife, my daughter, we've all had encounters over generations. But I'll tell you a little bit about my first one, and that happened back in the early 1990s. I was in college, 19 years old. I lived in a suburb of St. Louis, which was about an hour away. And, you know, me and my friends, we would come up here camping every chance that we got. You know, this was kind of our little escape. We loved it. And I'd come up here with, there were probably about 8 or 9 of us one night. And we were camping. We'd been riding four-wheelers around. And at this point, and when this happened, I didn't think anything of it because, you know, as college kids, I'd had a few beers. We were driving around on ATVs, and I see what I thought was my dog way up on the hill in this back area, and then all of a sudden my dog runs past me on the four-wheeler, and I look, and this thing was, 7-8 foot high on the level ground that I was on. I just turned around, went back, thought it was nothing, you know, and the only reason, you know, if there's alcohol involved, I usually don't even talk about sightings. But the only reason I'm bringing this up is because 6 months later is when I had what I consider my first real sighting. And me and a buddy of mine were coming up. It was March, I think. It was early spring, maybe April. I take that back. It would have been a little later than that because we had corn was growing pretty high. The grass was high. So it wasn't a little hard to kind of see around in the woods. But we had these huge storms coming up. So we were trying to hurry up, get our tent set, get a fire going. And we were just going to wait out the storm. And then we'd have the whole weekend to, relax on the farm. So we're coming up. And the animals, when we got here, were stirred up. I had deer on our little farm road. I had a deer jump out of the corn, almost land on the hood of my Jeep at that point. And, it was just kind of a weird vibe when we got up here. But we figured it was a storm, not a big deal. We get to our campgrounds that we have set up. And my buddy that was with me, he starts setting up tents. and getting coolers and stuff out. And I get on the four-wheeler and I head back to the back part of the farm with the idea that I'm gonna, grab some firewood and bring it back, and we're gonna start a fire, and we'll have a nice weekend. So I'm going to the back part of the farm. I'm going along these creeks that we have. Now the creek banks are about 8 foot below where I'm riding on. It's about an 8 foot drop off. And as I come to a bend in the creek, I see this thing squatting in the creek. I don't know if it's, originally I thought maybe it was drinking water, or maybe it was trying to catch like crawfish or minnows or something like that. But I pulled the four-wheeler to a stop, and immediately this thing turns its head and makes eye contact with me, probably about 20, 25 foot away from me. And it's in a squatting position. It makes eye contact for, it could have been 2 seconds. It felt like an eternity at that point. And all of a sudden, it just turned its head. From squatting, it jumped an 8 foot creek bank straight up and took off on 2 feet. So at this point, I had been kind of frozen. I couldn't move. I kind of got my senses back, and I turned around and went back to the campground. Took me a couple of minutes to kind of calm down. I told my buddy, hey, there's something back there. I'm like, I don't know if it's this, Momo thing that I've heard about all the time, but there's something back there. So we end up, he grabs, I had a little Ruger 10-22 rifle and a Mossberg 12 gauge shotgun. We each grabbed a gun, just in case, and we went down to where I saw it at, and we started tracking down the creek. And it's kind of like a gravel creek, but there's some little sand beds here and there. And on these sand beds, we were seeing these enormous footprints. And we're going down. We get down a little bit farther. The lights going is, starting to fade. We have flashlights, but again, these are flashlights from the 1990s, D-cell flashlights that aren't the best. And the shadows are kind of overhanging. We're kind of down in a valley at this point. And I look at my buddy and I say, hey, if something wanted to, get us to come down here and ambush us, this is the perfect situation. Like, I'm not feeling comfortable. And he said, I was just thinking the same thing. So we turned around, we went back, left our tent, left our food, left everything, basically just do, a couple basic things. The dog and me and him, we got in the Jeep and we made the hour drive back home and just said, hey, screw it, we'll come back tomorrow. So we come up the next day and we were going to try to get some plaster casts of the footprints that we had seen. And by the time we got up here, we had a major storm come through. And these creeks, when you get a big storm, they'll go from ankle deep to over my head. And, I'm about 6 foot tall. And that's kind of what had happened. Everything was underwater. We weren't able to grab any footprints. So that's was kind of my first, real introduction to it. And, of course, early 90s, there really wasn't much in the way of, the internet wasn't around yet. So it's not like, you could get on and look and see and like, oh, hey, there's tons of reports and sightings in Northeast Missouri. Back then, it's like, well, I'll confide in my family that I know believes in it and some close friends. But other than that, people are going to think you're nuts. So, that was kind of, like I said, my first experience. And I'd spent a lot of time up here alone. I mean, it's a farm. We had they had the crop ground and a lot of stuff leased out to somebody else. But we had like a small orchard, and I would come up a lot and take care of it, brush hog trails. I was up camping a lot, and I'd be up a lot. It was just me and my dog. And I mean, it was that way until we moved onto the property. But there were a lot of times I would be out in the middle of nowhere, and I would just get this, like that feeling when something's watching you and all the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And the second I would get that, my dog who would be with me, her hackles would go up on her back. She would start looking into the woods, growling. And this was the dog at that time that I had. It was a Rottweiler Labrador mix. She was a huge dog, was not scared of anyone or anything. And this dog basically backed up and was hiding underneath my legs just to get away from whatever this was. And this wasn't one time. This would happen constantly. And I mean, it's like, there's something there. There's something there. Fast forward, I don't know, maybe about 6-7 years. I was married at the time. Me and my wife had a 2-year-old daughter, and it was springtime, I think around Mother's Day or Father's Day, and we hadn't been camping that year, having, a younger child. We didn't get the opportunity to camp as much, and we decided to go camping for, I believe it was Father's Day. So we come up, we set everything up, and my wife and daughter are at our campgrounds. I'm up on the hill. I had gotten a chainsaw stuck in a tree the day before and ended up leaving it to come back with the right tools to get it out. And I get it out. I get on my four-wheeler. I'm coming down the hill, half throttle, and I hear this scream. And I mean, it was just like a blood curdling, like I don't even know how to describe it. It was just creepy, just, scary. I get to the campgrounds. My wife's in the truck. She has my rifle out of the truck. She's trying to figure out how to load it. She doesn't know what's going on. And, we kind of calmed down a little bit. We really like camping. We decided to stay. And, we got a big bonfire. Our campground is about an acre and a half field that's got a couple big trees in it. There's a cornfield on one side. There's a barn on one side. There's a creek with about an 8-foot drop off on one side. And then there's a big, grass field on the other. Well, about 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, she goes into the tent with my daughter and lays down with my daughter to get my daughter to go to sleep. And then she's going to come back out to the campfire and stay with me. And she falls asleep. So I'm sitting out there. I'm just enjoying sitting by the campfire. And all of a sudden I hear something moving around. Now I have 3 Coleman lanterns on the perimeter of this campground. And the whole campground is lit up pretty well. This thing never came into where I could see it in the light. It always stayed out, but I would hear it in the corn. I could hear it moving through the corn. And then I would hear something and could just barely make out something running through the grass field. And then I'd hear something running through the creek, and then I wouldn't hear anything. And then I'd hear something moving through the corn again, and then the grass field, and then the creek. And this thing circled our campsite for about 20 minutes. And after that, it moved off, and that was it for that time frame. So, since then, we've had other instances. Like I said, my son-in-law, my son, we've had other people up here that have seen them, and they've never harmed us. I actually, I'll give the area that I'm in, but I will never give the exact location because part of me actually wants to kind of protect them because I know, if the location or whatever got out, I'd probably see, who knows what coming through here. And they're not hurting anything. They've never been aggressive to us in any way whatsoever. That's kind of my story. Like I said, I've got some others I can share that are from other family members, but that's the main ones of mine, other than just little, seeing something here and there.
Matt, that is incredible. When you saw the tracks back in the 90s, if you were to estimate how long those tracks were, how big are we talking?
I'd say, and trying to go off memory, I'd say at least maybe 14 inches long.
Gotcha. Wow.
They were, but the ones that we've seen, and the ones that have mostly been seen, I think as a female, from research that I've done, it seems like the females are more kind of I'm not going to say friendly, but more kind of caring, and you'll see them. The males, it seems like usually when people will see them, there might be a female, but there's usually at least a male or another male, kind of off that you're not seeing. And I kind of get the impression, that it's something like that. The other thing that I've noticed is we'll have a whole lot of sightings up here for 6 months, 3 months, maybe a year, and then we don't see or hear anything for a year or two, maybe 3, and then all of a sudden they'll come up again. But in the time that we're not seeing them, I'm tracking and I'm seeing southern Iowa, or over into like Jacksonville, Illinois, or Pittsfield, Illinois. There'll be sightings in that area when we're not. So I think they kind of move around a little bit.
So I'm going to agree with you 100%. I'm actually from central Iowa, so I do a lot of looking into southern Iowa. And I'm going to agree that, yes, there's not an area where it can, support them, but I think there's some definite moving around the states and neighboring states. So I absolutely agree with you, Matt.
Yeah, and it's just weird, but some of the other sightings, like my son-in-law, and one of the kind of crazy things, when we had the experience with my wife, I've been talking about it, and she kept telling me, "Oh, you're just making it up. That didn't really happen." And then the next weekend we're up here and it happened, and she got firsthand. My son-in-law, similar situation. He was talking about it at a hunt club near us that he worked at, and he's like, "Yeah, they're saying you're just making it up. It's not real." He had come down and was spending Valentine's Day at our house, and he goes to take my daughter's dog out, and he sees it in our front yard. Now, we've got a big front yard, but it was along the gravel county road. He sees it, the dog notices it, it turns around and it runs off in the other direction where there's a dusk to dawn light, and it runs right under the light where he gets, a perfect view of it. And it's like, right after somebody says, no, they don't exist, it's almost like, that's a trigger for him.
That is very interesting. But yeah, it definitely seems like there's a correlation there. You mentioned there's multiple people that have had encounters on the property. Has anyone gotten like a really solid, like they're looking right at its face, they're able to see pretty solid details?
I did on my first one. I was about 20, 25 feet away, and I was making eye contact with it.
That's true.
And
yeah.
And my son-in-law, he got a pretty good look. Our yard, it's like I said, it's a good sized yard, but it's not that far away that he couldn't make it out. And we did actually after his, we went down there, and the tree that it was kind of hiding behind for a little while, we found a bunch of long, kind of coarse brown hair. It almost reminded me of like a horse's mane.
Did you happen to keep those?
I've got them here somewhere. This was probably like 2016, so it's been a while. And I've got a lot of files, a lot of stuff like that I keep. But my office, I'm not the most organized person. It is in my office somewhere.
Oh, I totally get it. And we can talk about this off air as well, but there is a DNA study going on with North Carolina State with a gentleman named Darby Orcutt. And you can send any evidence to him right now to get tested in their laboratory, and it doesn't cost you a thing. So if
definitely send me that information.
I totally will. Yeah, if you have hair, this is the time. You can send anything in and no cost. So it is like a golden opportunity to have your stuff tested.
Yes, I would definitely have to.
So going back to when you had that eye-to-eye contact, Based on, well, first, are there any details that stick out in your mind about like features of the face you may have noticed?
The eyes the eyes were just kind of like hypnotic. Like, the minute I made eye contact, I was frozen. I could not move. But the face was, I've heard this from a lot of other people, but the face was more human looking than anything else. But the eyes were just, a lot of people talk about, red eyes and all. I don't remember the eyes being red. It just, the face just looked more human than anything else. There really wasn't any hair on the face. That was about the only part of it. I didn't see hair, and it just looked like a human.
The eye itself, did it have like whites around the center of the eye, or was it in all one color?
No, it was all kind of a dark, I want to say black, but I'm not. Honestly, as long as it's been, it might have been a little, could have been dark blue or something like that, but it was like a darker, and no, there were no whites in the eye at all.
Yeah, that lines up actually with a report I took earlier today from Indiana. That's wild. Did you see any, was the mouth open? Did you see teeth, anything like that?
Literally from squatting, it just turned its head, mouth closed, just like, say you were at a Walmart or somewhere like that, and, you pass by and you look at someone, kind of the same thing, just kind of looked and just turned its head, jumped and left.
Let's say that, let's say the night played out differently and you had gotten to the point where you're running after with the shotguns and you find it, and then you're looking at it again, but this time it's through the scope or whatever you have. Do you think you could have taken that shot, or would it have been extremely hard because of the way it looked?
At the time, it's hard to say because I had a lot of adrenaline going. I grew up hunting. I don't have a problem, hunting, and I had a lot of adrenaline going. But on, the other hand, I grew up with around my grandfather a lot. He was half Cherokee and spent most of his life hunting and fishing. And, one thing he would tell me constantly is, if you have to kill, there's nothing wrong with it. But the only reason you ever need to kill something is for protection or for food. There's no other reason. So if it was for, if the thing was charging me, I don't think I would have hesitated, other than the fact that, the size of this thing, I don't know that a 12 gauge or a 22 would have done much to it either.
Absolutely. Did you notice a certain shape to the head at all?
Kind of like, best description I could give would be like kind of like a gorilla at the zoo. It kind of had that kind of cone shaped on the top.
Gotcha.
But that would be the closest description, I think.
So you mentioned that you saw it jump up 8 feet. Did you see it run at all for any different a distance?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe how it was running? Okay.
So not for a distance. It was squatting. So from squatting, it jumped straight up. It didn't stand up. It didn't get a run and go. It was squatting, and it jumped straight up an 8-foot embankment. When it landed, it was on 2 feet, and it moved forward going on 2 feet. Now, I did not see it for, a big length of time. I saw it like moving, and honestly, I don't know if you've ever seen one or not, but the first time you see one, it's a little traumatizing.
I have not had that happen yet. I know that it is, from what I've heard, because I've done a lot of interviews, it can be extremely traumatizing, and I know that will happen someday if I keep going down the road I am. So we'll see, but not yet.
I've got a different opinion of it nowadays. Now, no, I don't go in the woods without a very large firearm, but I have no plans to hurt or kill or anything like that, this animal. If anything, I'm more to where I would try to protect it from others that might want to.
So That's interesting. So you mentioned before that you've never felt threatened by the creatures at all on your property, but you will not go into the woods without a large firearm. Is there a reason then that there would be that kind of difference?
Yeah, well, so I've never felt threatened, but that doesn't logic, that doesn't necessarily mean the day won't come, or maybe, and it's, it's not just for these. I mean, we have mountain lions up here. We don't have bears yet, but they're starting to get a little close to the area. And just in general, I mean, I've hiked in the Sierra Nevadas. I've hiked in Alaska. I've hiked in a lot of different countries, and I will take something for protection because of the unknown out there. And I will take the biggest thing that I can take. And these things, I know they're out there. They've never threatened in any way, and I would. I doubt I would ever pull a firearm out of the holster, but, I'm not going to go out there and not carry anything and then have that 1 in a million chance happen that, maybe I piss it off or, I get one that, somebody else was out hunting that wasn't supposed to be there, took a shot at it, and it was desperate. So, yeah, I will, protect myself if I have to.
I think that's smart, definitely. You mentioned that there was potentially some hair found. Has there ever been any photos or video evidence taken, or do you have game cams up, anything like that?
We have game cams up. We have never caught anything. And there was one here recently where people were putting food out, and it was coming and getting the food. So they put cameras out there. And the theory from what I'm reading is the infrared light or whatever the game cameras put out, that it's something that maybe their eyes can see the beam from it. But on this one in particular, they moved the cameras to where it could not get the food without coming into the area. And they came back and the food was gone. So they went looking around, and they actually have a plaster cast to where it laid down on the ground just out of sight of the cameras and was able to reach up with its arm and get the food. But they have a half body cast. I think this was in Indiana, but I'd have to look it up.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, this was just a couple of years ago, like maybe a year or two. It hasn't been that long. And I'll see if I can find it and send it to you when we get done here.
You mentioned that you moved onto the property. What's the closest that you have things happen? Have you ever, or what's the closest to your home residence there on that property that you have had things occur?
Well, like I said, my son-in-law, it was in the front yard, at the edge of the yard on him. And at the time, our front yard, I'm looking at it right now, it's maybe, 150 yards from where my house sits to the county road. And right at the county road, we've got a line of trees. Now, there was another house on the other side of the road at the time. It was an old house, like a really, really old house that was being rented out. And that was where the dusk to dawn light was. So it was at the edge there, and it actually, ran across the road and ran between their garage, which wasn't attached to the house, and the dusk to dawn light, like right under the dusk to dawn light, and ran into a cow field behind it. So that's the closest, probably. I have had another one about 3 years ago. I was out at night. We have livestock, and I was putting our chickens and stuff up out in the backyard, and I start hearing coyotes, but it's not like a normal kind of coyote. Normally, if you hear coyotes, you'll hear like a small group of them, over here, and then another small group over in another area, and they kind of like go back and forth. This was like a pack of maybe 100 or more that was like yelping, barking, letting out, and then I hear this roar, this primal, deep roar. And this was, I don't know, maybe 800 yards from the backyard across a creek in this field. And it was dark at the time. And I could hear the coyotes. I could hear this thing roaring. And I'm out there at the time. You know, I had a little 38 snub-nose revolver that I keep in my jacket. And I'm like, well, for one thing, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm getting something a little bigger than this. And I'm going to get my son or someone to come out. And I got my son. He came out on the deck. But at that point, the only thing we heard was the sound of like a whimpering dog. Like when a dog gets hurt, we could hear that. So I don't know if like it was one of them fighting with coyotes or something, or what was going on. And it was about 2 days before I was able to really get down there. And, you know, I was hoping to go down, find prints in the snow. This was early February. Prints in the snow, maybe if there was like some blood or something. And, but it was one of those times to where it doesn't get light till 7, 8 o'clock, and it gets dark at 4 o'clock. And with my work schedule, it was dark when I'd leave home and dark when I got home, and I wasn't going out there in the dark by myself. So I get out there, and I get to where I could hear it at, and there's no tracks, there's nothing. So I go up on the hill right above it, and there's a lot of tracks, but there was a tree, there was snow on the ground, but there was this tree that had a perfect circle of just grass, where something, almost like something had walked around in a circle, like it was nervous or pacing or something, and worn all the snow down. There was a path on the hill there where you're familiar with with like a deer path in the woods, correct?
Right, yep.
So it was kind of like a deer path, but this was in locust, like thorn trees. But this path was about 4 to 5 foot wide, and it's still there now. But it was like what you would expect to see a deer path, but it was 4 to 5 foot wide. And the other weird thing that I found up there is there was grass on the ground, almost kind of like something had built a huge nest, but it wasn't the grass that grows on that hillside. It was a completely different type of grass, like it had been brought in.
Were you able to recognize what kind of grass it was?
I mean, it was prairie grass, which what's up there is, I believe, is a brome and a timothy mix that we use for hay. But this was like prairie grass, which is around in the area, but not on that hillside at all.
That wearing the snow down is so interesting. Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, on that same hillside, about 15 years ago, I was brush hogging one day, and I found a black calf leg, just the leg of a calf. We don't have cows. Our neighbor has cows. He doesn't have black cows. But I checked with all the neighbors around that I know that have cows. Nobody was missing a calf.
This is starting to sound like a place I know in Tennessee. This is wild, dude. Oh, man. So was it like it had been a clean cut, or was it like it had been torn off?
It was like it was tore off, but I mean, the hair was on it.
Yeah.
It was like just a leg.
This is wild. Has there ever, yeah.
Like Thanksgiving when you pull the leg off a turkey?
Exactly. Okay. Gotcha.
That's what it looked like.
Wow. Has there ever been a time when you've been on this property and it just things really have kind of been escalated and you're like, you know what? I'm done with this. Get me out of here now. I just don't want to deal with this anymore.
No.
Okay. So you've always felt in control of the situation. That's great.
No, I mean, this is my property.
Yeah.
Like I said, my father and his brothers and sisters grew up nearby. They would hunt and fish and trap on this property. My grandfather would hunt and fish and trap on this property. My dad bought this property in the mid-'60s. And so, you know, he owned it before I was born. When I was a kid, my dad was a real estate agent. We moved around a lot, like, you know, a lot of real estate agents. They get a good deal on a house. They'll buy it and live in it for a couple of years and flip it and then and we'd move around, like not like a wide area, but around the different suburbs of St. Louis. But this was always the one place that I had that was constant, that was home. We had a little camper up here, and every weekend, pretty much like year round, we would come up and we would spend the weekend up here. So this is my place. I ended up building a house about 17 years ago on this property. I have a son. My daughter, she got married. She and her husband bought a piece of property that's on the back end that joins up to this farm. And, they're not planning on leaving. We're not planning on leaving. They have a kid. So, hopefully their kid's not planning on leaving. And it's going to stay in the family forever, and nothing's going to run us out.
That's awesome. I love that. You mentioned, did you mention, I think the grandfather had some sightings over the years?
Yeah, he did not really talk about him a whole lot, but I mean, talking with him, he would mention, we would talk about, going out, and we'd go out hunting or fishing or whatever. And, you'd hear things, you'd hear like, what I now know as a tree knock or a wood knock. We'd hear something like that off in the distance, and he would just say, there's a lot of animals out there. If you don't hurt them, they won't hurt you. If you're lucky, maybe they'll show themselves to you someday. Gotcha. And I mean, he would, say stuff like that. And, I'd ask him, I'm like, what are you talking about? And he'd say, well, when the time comes, you may know. And, it's like, well, what are they? Have you seen them? And he said, there's a lot of things I've seen out in the woods.
Oh, wow.
He would never actually, come out and say, but like I said, his mother was Cherokee. He grew up pretty much in the woods. He was kind of what we would consider a mountain man today. And he didn't grow up Cherokee, but he grew up with a lot of their kind of ways and a lot of kind of the respect for nature and all that. And, I mean, he was very interesting. I mean, we could go fishing out to a lake. We would get out there, and he'd sit there for about a minute. He'd look at the lake, and he'd point to one part of the lake or the pond. He'd say, that's where the fish are biting. And sure enough, that's where the fish would be biting.
Wow.
We'd be out on the farm, and, he'd say, oh, it's about to rain. And, well, what do you mean it's about to rain? Well, can't you smell it? And about a half hour later, it'd start to rain. And he was definitely old school. He'd get his dogs to go hunting. He'd open the trunk of his car. His dogs would jump in the trunk of his car. He'd drive his car out to the farm and go bird hunting. I would never put my dogs in the trunk of my car, but I guess the 70s and the 60s, it was a different time. I mean, my uncle, he always had like a new Cadillac. And I've seen my uncle literally driving his Cadillac across a cow field to go park it to go hunting.
Oh, wow. That's a different time. But guys like your grandfather are hard to find in these current days, at least in my circles. Maybe I'm in the wrong circles, but it's just that intuition, it's very, very rare. Are there other sounds that you hear in your area that you attribute to these creatures?
I mean, like I said, wood knocks, every once in a while, not really. There's just times we just hear like weird noises, and we'll hear like right now we're, northern Missouri, we have coyotes here. We don't have wolves here. Over the last year, when you go outside at night, we can hear what sounds like a wolf howling. Now, I've talked to the conservation department. My daughter has heard it. My wife's heard it. My son's heard it. And they're like, yeah, that's definitely a wolf or something trying to imitate a wolf. But it's like the 1950s Wolfman movie. It's like the howls they would use in that movie, but it's coming from out on the farm somewhere. And we've heard other like strange noises of like basically animals that shouldn't be here, but you hear them and it's almost like, is something trying to imitate that, or is there, something weird going on. You know, we got caves on the property. You know, it's like, are these caves, you know, some kind of magnet for something or what?
Are there certain animal sounds that stick out where you hear them and you're like, this sounds like an 800-pound owl or something like that?
No. I mean, like I said, this wolf sound is one. And the first time I heard it, I was way out on the far end of the yard. It was dark out. I was finishing taking care of animals for the night, and I hear a wolf howl. And it was a pretty good distance away, but it had the sound of like a, you know, 1950s werewolf horror movie that, you know, you go back to watching those movies as a kid, and it's like, oh crap, I got to get in the house now.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like that flight or fight, and the flight's like, yeah, I'm going straight to the house before, you know, rational thought kicks in and be like, yeah, there's none of those here.
It's a kind of a related topic, but, you know, has there been ever sightings or talk of the dogman cryptids in the same area that you're aware of?
Not here that I'm aware of. I think the southern part of the state. Now, we have seen large black cats up here, and we have seen mule deer up here, and neither one of those are animals that are in this area. The mule deer, I had seen them on and off in the woods for about a decade or two, and no one else had seen them till about 2-3 years ago. We were on side-by-sides. I was on one. My daughter, son-in-law, and grandson was on the other one, and we were way back down the gravel county road, and we were going through a bean field or a hay field. I forgot what it was. And we look over and we see these deer, and they're hopping like Pepe Le Pew from like the Bugs Bunny cartoon,
right?
Which is what mule deer do. And you know, my son-in-law, he's among other things, he's a professional hunting guide, and he said those are mule deer. And I said, yeah, and that's not the first time we've seen them. Large black cats, I had seen them on and off a couple of times. I've had a couple of people that I've let hunt up here have said, you know, you got large black cats up here. And I said, well, you know, don't tell the conservation agents that, because they'll tell you they don't exist. And we were out fishing last summer on one of our lakes, and my daughter, who's, you know, pretty calm and collected, and, you know, I'm in the Navy. I have a colorful vocabulary, let's say.
Right.
But my daughter's not that way. And all of a sudden my daughter yells, "What the F is that?" And we look up, and I did not see them. My son-in-law was like, "It's a black cat." So I grab my handgun, and I grab my GoPro, and we start walking where it ran into the woods in the hillside. And we're going to see if we could find some tracks, which we were not able to find tracks. But we're going to where my son-in-law saw it, and my daughter's like, "No, it wasn't there. It was over here." And she's guiding us to another area. My son-in-law's like, "No, it was over here." So we come back around, and like, "Okay, hon, where did you see it at?" And she said, "Right there." And my son-in-law said, "Oh, the one I saw, it was over here, like about 15 foot down the bank." So there were two large black cats. They both saw them clear as day.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, that's if you've looked into cryptids. You know, the black cats are like another thing that they don't exist, but everybody's seeing them.
Exactly. And now it's like, well, now we've got potentially multiple things going on this property. Do you ever hear anything weird, like, you know, things that really don't belong, like a car door closing or a rusty gate type closing sound? Anything really weird like that?
Don't hear that. I did when my daughter was in junior high. I was up here. It was around Halloween with a bunch of her friends, and we were down at the campgrounds. I'm trying to think where we were at, but all of a sudden one of the kids, like, there's somebody walking up on the hillside, and we look over and see, and it was like, it wasn't a flashlight, but it was like two lights. I don't know if it was, I'm not going to say it was eyes. It was almost like somebody had some kind of like glasses that would have had some kind of a light on them or something where they could see where they were going. But I mean, this farm is in the middle of nowhere. I'm not just going to walk down on this farm. And yeah, it was something on the hillside. So I took all the kids, got them kind of to a safe place where my wife could watch them. And I got in the Jeep and I grabbed my rifle and started going up because I thought we just had like a trespasser. And we got there, no sign of anybody.
Do you remember the color of them?
Yeah, it was like a reddish color, like not red, but a reddish, like maybe orange. And no telling what it was.
When you're walking around the property, is there any section where you walk through an area and you're like, oh, it kind of feels a little electric here, or something just shifted for a minute, or anything like that?
Not any one area, but there are times to where, we'll be walking and you just kind of get a weird vibe, but it's kind of a weird vibe over the whole area. There's something going on, no telling, what, but you just get that feeling like there's what's going on right now. And usually when I get those feelings, I don't necessarily go investigate. I'm like, you know what? It's a weird feeling. I'm going to leave it be, and I'm going to mind my own business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a smart way to put it, because it's not like you're a Bigfoot researcher. I mean, it feels like you're just you have this property and you're just trying to live on it, and.
Right. I mean, I am a researcher to a certain degree just because I've been obsessed with it since seeing it, but I'm not, professional. I'm just, I put out a little Facebook group and just basically, I'm, ask, just try to go around if I see anybody that has had a sighting or something like that, I'll try to interview them or information from them, but that's about the extent of it.
That's actually another question I was going to ask you. After having these sightings, have you checked with your neighbors? Have you found out, yes, there's other things happening in the same area outside of your property?
I have in the past run across some. There's a few that there's a lake close to here. It's like the town reservoir. And I've talked to one guy that grew up in that area, and he had multiple sightings growing up, and his brother lives close by, and his brother has sightings as well.
Wow. Oh boy.
And I've talked to some other people, like when my son-in-law had his, that was like about 2015, 2016, something like that. 2 years ago, I was up at our local Casey's, and I was talking to the girl at the counter, and she's like, oh, my husband has seen it. And I'm like, can I talk to your husband? So I talked to him, and he was talking about being up at the lakes and hearing something, and what he described was a mountain lion, I think. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then talking to him, he tells me about back in about 2015, 2016, about the same time that my son-in-law saw it, which was around Valentine's Day. They were coming home around Valentine's Day, right at where the exit where I live at is. And he said, we saw what we thought was a huge, like a pine tree or cedar tree in the median of the highway. And I said that it moved. And his buddy's like, no. So they turn around and there was nothing there in the median. But that was like about the same time frame that my son-in-law saw it here. So yeah, I have talked to, other people, Clarksville, Missouri. 2 years ago, someone, and I've been trying to get a copy of the photos, but someone had a whole bunch of large footprints in the snow up around a little attraction. They had a sky lift. It's like a high point on the bluff on the river, and it had a bunch of footprints in the snow. And so, yeah, I've talked to quite a few people around and, gathered up stuff.
Have you ever looked up, there's a website called bigfootmap.com, and you can see like certain areas of the country where there's way more activity?
I don't know if it's Bigfoot map. I've seen a couple. When I had my first couple ones, I was talking with the BFRO with Matt a little bit, and he sent a guide out here, and then we just kind of, lost touch with each other. But he had a guy that kind of came out and looked around here. And this was actually right after me and my wife had seen the one when we were camping that, the internet was still fairly new at the time, but we had talked to him, and he's like, yeah, get on the website, and there's some audio files. And the scream that we had heard was one that they said was like a territorial map. But, they have a map, or they don't have a map. They have like a county by county sighting list. Right. And I have gone through that. I think they have a map too, but I haven't been on their site in a while.
Yeah, no, that is a great resource as well. Bigfoot Map is good because it utilizes that database, and also he gets stuff himself. And it'd be really interesting if you check that out, because it'll probably make sense. I'm guessing there'll be a connection to the area where you're at when you look at the map. That's usually
I definitely will check that out when we get off the phone.
Absolutely. How recent would you say? What was the most recent Bigfoot related interaction that you've had?
This spring we had something. It was kind of one of those things. I didn't know if it was one that we were waiting to see if something else would happen, and nothing else had happened. But we had, I was coming home early spring. Well, not even spring, like late February, early March, county road at night. And I saw some eyes, and they were like pretty high up, like, 7 foot high up, just off of the side of the road. I drove past, and I just kind of caught them out of the corner of my eye. I stopped. I put my Jeep in reverse. I backed up, and I couldn't see anything. Now, that could have been an owl in a tree, maybe. I don't know. But I'm like, well, there's something to watch. Let's see if, we start getting some activity. And haven't really seen anything else. I mean, last summer we had a couple of, just a couple of minor things, like nothing major. And I think that's a lot of them too, is they kind of get in the woods and, they don't really make their presence known.
Absolutely. They just kind of slowly build up to the, just the kind of history of the property. Are you keeping a journal of everything that's been going on, or is it just up in your head?
On and off. I would log in, I would log everything, and other people I talked to. And I mean, this has been going on since like the early 90s that I've been trying to document it. And, in that time, it's like it's gone from, like, I've got floppy disks that have all kinds of people I've interviewed. I've got like the little hard disks. I don't even remember what you call those. What were they, 3.5 inch or something like that?
Yep.
I've got several of those. I got 2 of those that are filled with just sightings from this area. When I was younger, I worked in radio, and I kind of used that as a way to like get in and talk to people, because I'd help out their news department occasionally in the area. And so, I'd kind of be like, yeah, tell me. And that got my foot in the door to quite a few.
Oh, wow. That's really cool that you have those old documentation resources that you made. Do you mind talking? We talked a little bit off the air about you might have some future projects, and I'm sure people are curious, like, hey, I want to maybe reach out to this guy who's in Northeast Missouri, because, man, I've heard of stuff going on there too.
Yeah, and I would actually appreciate you letting me do this. I do a YouTube channel. It's more like farm and homesteading and gardening kind of stuff. And I've been thinking about and kind of slowly getting started. I was going to try to do a YouTube channel and do a podcast with it of cryptid related, just sightings and stuff, basically in the Midwest area, like Missouri, Illinois, Ohio. The Momo stuff here. I've looked into a lot on them. There's a lot of stuff down in like Cape Girardeau, Missouri, down south that I see occasionally, down in Arkansas, the big muddy monster out in Murfreesboro, Illinois. I go down there for work occasionally, and there's all these, different things. There's actually some active dogman sightings down in around the Springfield, Branson area right now, and I'm wanting to start like just basically like what you do, like a YouTube channel and podcast of just cryptid stuff. And I would, if you don't mind, it may be 6 months before I really get it going. But if anybody's out there and has a story they'd like to share, I would really like to hear it. And I can give out my email address. It's for my other YouTube channel, but I mean, it goes to me. All I've done so far is I've set up a YouTube channel with nothing on it that's called Midwestern Monsters. Excuse me. But my email address, it's McGeeFarms72@gmail.com. And McGee is Magee. And, if someone's out there, if they're in the Midwestern area and they've seen, the big hairy man or a dog man or, some other kind of animal that shouldn't be there or that, doesn't exist, or if you've got, one in your town, like a legend of one, please reach out to me. I would love to hear your story. I would love to hear about what's there, because I'm trying to put these together. And like I said, my hope is just to kind of share it. When I had my first encounter, there wasn't a lot of resources. I had very supportive family members that had also seen and experienced things. But when you first see it, people don't believe you. People make fun of you. And so just getting the resources out there. So, if somebody sees something and they're like, well, I'm not the only one that's seen it. I'd like to have that for other people. Plus, I love hearing about them. Everybody loves a mystery. Everybody loves a scary story, and I'm no different. So if you've got one, please reach out and share it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have those links in the show notes for this, the description on YouTube. So guys, make sure that you hit that up, and you can make sure you're subscribed to his channel, all that good stuff, because there'll probably be some really cool stuff coming out on it. But Matt, thank you so much for hanging out this July 4th. I appreciate you hopping on and sharing the wild stuff that is going on down at your property in Northeast Missouri.
Oh, no problem. If you ever get down this way, hit me up. I'll give you a tour of where we've seen some of the stuff.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, thanks for chatting, Matt. Hold on 1 minute after this, please.
You got it.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. All right, I'm going to use this space this week to announce that I'll be at the Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, Oregon as an attender. I won't be presenting or anything, but I'll be hanging out, trying to interview people that have had Bigfoot encounters. If you're from the Oak Ridge, Oregon area or surrounding and you've had a Bigfoot experience, please contact me directly, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Also, Priscilla was nice enough that if you get your tickets through SasquatchSummerfest.com and use code Bigfoot Society, you can get 50% off the cost of your tickets, which is a big amount. So code Bigfoot Society to get 50% off your tickets, SasquatchSummerfest.com, and helps out the podcast as well. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Please let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.